Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums... Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? 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 We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. My name is John, and I am here to remind y'all that Rossifari Zoo News is a crowdsourced zoo news program. So if you happen to see anything that you think is zoo news worthy, go ahead and shoot it to me, rossifaripod@gmail.com, or tag me in it at Rossifari on the socials and at Rossifaripod on the TikTok machine. And whether I use your story or not, I'll say your name at the end of the episode. Yay! All right, so as I'm sure you've all seen on social media, the big news from my world this week is that I went back and played the drums with Emily the elephant at Buttonwood Park Zoo. It was awesome and magical and did all the things you think it was, and I can't wait to share more about it in an upcoming episode, and also, of course, more on social media. But I do want to take a moment to thank Buttonwood Park Zoo for being just such an incredible friend of the podcast. Drumming with an elephant. I still can't quite get over it, honestly. And that actually leads me to a story that I'm going to share here with y'all, because I know you enjoy these types of stories. Now, this fits firmly into my, I don't know if I should share this or if it sounds too much like bragging category of conversation, but I find that I always get positive feedback when I share these. And honestly, I really just can't believe that my life is my life sometimes. So, here you go. The reason I got to drum with Emily again is that I was in Massachusetts playing a couple fill-in performances of $1 Million Quartet out at the Cape Playhouse on Cape Cod. Now, I played the final two shows of the run, the matinee and the evening show on Saturday of last week. And when I looked out at the audience, I noticed that there was a family. It's like a mom, dad, two 20-something-year-old daughters, I assume. They came to both shows, sitting in the front row both times. And each member of the family wore a different piece of $1 Million Quartet merch to each show. Now, to do the math for you, that is 8 different pieces of MDQ merch in a single day. Now, I was only subbing the show that day and had done one other one, but apparently they saw the show 10 times during the couple weeks that it ran at the theater, from what the guys in the cast who had done the whole run told me. And these people didn't do the stage door thing or anything, so I don't really know their story, but some of the merch they had was from the original tour of the show before I was involved, and some was from the various tours I've been a part of, and some I assume was from other regional theater productions, because I didn't recognize it. And remember, I've been associated with the show since 2015 at this point, so me not recognizing some of the merch is pretty shocking. Even if I didn't do a run of a show, I usually have friends that did or whatever and have the merch. So yeah, these people are clearly huge MDQ fans. They also sang along quietly, not disturbing people, and knew where to look for the jokes, and were tapping each other during the emotional parts and just all kinds of stuff. They were clearly huge fans of $1 Million Quartet. So at the end of the night, I knew I was going to hand them my sticks after the final bow. And this is something that I started doing a while ago when touring the show, and I save it for the biggest fans or people who I can tell are going to love it, often like young kids who rock out and dance along. To be honest, I would do it more, but there's always an element of feeling self-conscious for me, if I'm being honest, as in like, who would want my drumsticks? Now, I have a collection of sticks that I've gotten from famous drummers I've seen, but who the heck is John Rossi? As a matter of fact, I would have never started doing this, except that I had audience members yell up to the stage asking for sticks. So, since then, whenever I do it, it goes over super well. And honestly, it not only makes the audience member feel special, but usually makes me feel pretty special too. So, why not? So in this case, I decided to give the family a pair of my sticks. And as I stood up from the kit for my bow and then to, go and hand them to those people, I actually had the thought, wait, switch these sticks out with other ones before you give them to the audience members because an elephant drummed with one of these. And just every single part of that sentence is the most ridiculous thing. I get to do the thing I always dreamed about doing and get to do it at a level where people sometimes want to be handed my sticks from the stage. I would say thrown from the stage, but after almost hitting a guy in the eye with a drumstick, I only hand them out now. That's a whole other story, and my producer's legal team wanted me to be clear about that. Anyway, but then on top of that, I get to go meet cool animals and do incredible things like drum with an elephant. What is that? And that one thought about switching sticks because Emily had played with one, it just so perfectly encapsulated all of the craziness that I have built my life into. And it really left me feeling super proud and honestly even humbled. And normally I get annoyed when people say they're humbled by an experience or a thought because if anything, they feel good about it. But I did. I was like, why is this? Why? I don't know. I just kept thinking about how I had that thought and how crazy it was that I got to have it. Yeah, I'm very thankful for this life I have, and I'm thankful for all of you for allowing me to build this side of that life and for being here and giving me the reach that makes facilities excited to be part of the Rossifari family and to trust me and know they can trust y'all as well and be open and honest with my audience. That means a lot. So thank you. And now, speaking of animals and drumming, here's me drumming on a parody song about animals. All right, so we don't really have any huge headline story this week, which I am actually pretty excited about, in part because it means there isn't anything crazy I have to report on this week, and in part because it means I can take more time talking about births, because, y'all, we have had a lot of births in the last few weeks, so let's get right to them. Well, it is that season, and it is off to a great start. I'm talking about red panda birthing season, of course. And we start off this section by announcing that Raji, the female red panda at Seneca Park Zoo, has given birth to a single cub. Now, sadly, Raji decided to abandon the pandlet, but the veterinary staff have stepped in and started bottle feeding and raising the cub, a decision made easier by the fact that the cub did nurse from mom before she abandoned it, meaning it did get that important colostrum that helps babies survive. Amazingly, you can visit the zoo and see the cub through the viewing glass at the veterinary hospital, which I am planning on doing the day this episode drops. And I cannot wait. So excited. And that is not the only pandlet we get to announce this week, as Potter Park Zoo has announced the birth of a single cub to mom Malia and dad Deegan Reed, the third successful litter between this pair. They must really like each other. Mom and cub are doing great together, with staff watching nest box cameras to make sure all is going according to plan. On a side note, I know at least one keeper who says that Deegan Reed is the best panda of all the pandas, and while I respectfully disagree, I think it's pretty cool that he's got another cub out there. The Columbus Zoo has announced the birth of a litter of Pallas cat kittens to mom Tina and dad Moose. Now, I got to see the first litter these two had multiple times, actually, and they were adorable and playful and sassy and just all the things you want from Pallas kittens. So now I'm even more motivated to get back to Columbus to see these little ones as well, though they are currently not on exhibit. On a very random but interesting side note, the mom, Tina, has her name spelled with two I's. Tiina. The more you know. The Minnesota Zoo has announced the birth of two Amur tiger cubs, one male and one female. Mother Sundari is doing very well and taking great care of her kittens, or tiglets. The Toledo Zoo has announced the birth of a Bornean orangutan. Now, this little one is not only very adorable, but comes from a very important genetic match in the SSP. And, you know, I sometimes hate the term genetically valuable because it just sounds so, I don't know, cold and impersonal. But this is a very genetically valuable orangutan, and that's actually really exciting news for the species and for the SSP, so I guess we'll roll with it. If you stop by the Toledo Zoo, you will be able to see this little oranglet in the habitat with mom already. And that's not the only Bornean orangutan born recently, as the Virginia Zoo has also announced a birth to parents Dara and Solaris. Now, this is only the second ever orangutan to be born at the zoo, and each of these births is super important because on average, Bornean orangutans give birth to a single offspring every 7 to 9 years, and as such may only have 4 or, if they're very productive, 5 babies in their lifetime. So each birth is incredibly important to zoo-based populations. The Sydney Zoo has welcomed 3 capybara babies, or caplets, to the world. The parents are Zoe and Sanchez, and the little ones, actually called pups, are named Iago, Iapa, and Iguazu, which is really interesting. I don't know what those mean, but I like them. The Denver Zoo has a new lesser kudu in town. Born to parents Elsa and Maki, the little girl is named Rue. The naming theme of female kudus at the Denver Zoo is strong female characters, such as Rue's mother, Elsa, named for Elsa from Frozen, and Eleanor, who got that name from a character with the same name on The Good Place. Rue is named after RuPaul, since she was born on the first day of Pride. Tanganyika Wildlife Park has announced the birth of a Grevy's zebra foal. Grevy's zebras are the most endangered of the 3 zebra species, with less than 3,000 individuals left in the wild, so this zeblet is a particularly important birth. The Tulsa Zoo has announced the birth of a critically endangered Madagascan flat-tailed tortoise, a species I had never heard of before, but that is absolutely adorable. This little one, which is a little bit bigger than a quarter right now, hatched after spending 314 days in an incubator and is the first of its kind to hatch at the zoo. An absolutely beautiful and stunning animal. And also, I don't know why, but I was thrown by the term Madagascan. I don't know why I thought it would be like Madagascari or Madagascarian or something, but Madagascan. Huh, who knew? The Welsh Mountain Zoo has welcomed a new snow leopard cub to the family. Zoo Miami has announced the birth of a new giant eland. And Woodland Park Zoo has announced the birth of a male gorilla, a first-time birth for mom Akenji. Now, sadly, Akenji wasn't interested in showing maternal behaviors, so the animal care team stepped in and started bottle feeding and hand rearing the baby. The current hope is that Akenji will decide to step up, and she will be given ample opportunities to do so by the team as they continue to care for the baby until that time, or until another option needs to be pursued. And this is actually not the only gorilla born at an AZA facility recently, as the Columbus Zoo has seen the birth of the 35th gorilla to be born at the zoo, an incredible number, by the way. Katembi is the father, and the mom is Sue, a first-time mom who is doing an amazing job. Congrats to the Columbus Zoo not only on this birth, but on an incredible milestone. All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
What's all around you, almost everywhere you look, and makes your life better? Birds. Learn all about these beautiful creatures in this wonderful new podcast called Birds of a Feather Talk Together. Two experts guide two newbies on their journey to learn more. Mallard ducks, ivory-billed woodpeckers, Hawaiian honeycreepers, blue jays, cardinals, sandhill cranes, and more. Each week we discuss a different bird and walk away with a better understanding of the birds all around us. Oh, and we have a ton of fun doing it. Listen now. You're going to like learning about these birds. I guarantee it.
The Bronx Zoo has announced the hatching of a pair of Baja blue rock lizards. This is an incredibly rare species that can only be found in the wild on the tip of the Baja California Peninsula in northwestern Mexico. Our friends at Elmwood Park Zoo have announced the birth of the biggest baby porcupine, or porcupet, or porklet if you're me, ever born at the zoo. The baby continues the zoo's tradition of naming porcupines after utensils, and this big one is named Griddle. The Maryland Zoo has welcomed a new ground hornbill, the second birth to parents Blue and North in under a year. And along with that announcement, the Maryland Zoo has also welcomed a new female chimpanzee to their troop. Altina Wildlife Park has announced the birth of two African serval kittens, one male and one female. Sadly, Mom Layla showed not only a lack of interest in raising the kittens, but actual frustration towards them, so the zoo staff had to step in and are now doing an incredible job hand-rearing the two. The kittens have been named Naya and Kofi. The Kansas City Zoo, which has another story coming up soon, has welcomed a female Maasai giraffe to the herd. The bird team at Zoo Atlanta continues to have an incredible streak of hatchings happening, with the first ever births of red and yellow barbet chicks in the zoo's history. The Akron Zoo has announced the birth of a snowy owlet, or, as I would say, a snowy owlet. Oh. Anyway, baby owls look like Muppets, and this one is no exception. Parents Cirrus and Frost are doing an incredible job taking care of their owlet, which will be publicly visible at a later, less ridiculously hot date. And last but not least in this section, the National Zoo and Aquarium in Canberra, Australia has announced the birth of a koala joey to Mum Matilda and Dad Bailey. The joey, or koalet as I like to say, is a girl. And that brings us to our deaths for the week. And we start off this section saying goodbye to not a zoo animal, but to a beloved animal that was featured on the podcast a while ago. Fruit the frog has passed away. Fruit was a White's tree frog who lived with Sammy Ray, the lead vocalist of Sammy Ray and the Friends, an incredible Brooklyn-based band that I'm in love with. Sammy, along with drummer Seabass and my good friend James, their bass player, came on the podcast a few years ago to share all about their creative endeavors, and in the process, we talked about Fruit a lot. I love the music Sammy Ray and the Friends makes, but I've always loved it 10% more, knowing that a little tree frog was the mascot of the band and that Sammy Ray took giving him the best life just very seriously. Fruit will be missed. And speaking of animals I loved, the Columbus Zoo has said goodbye to Bruce, one of the ambassador bat-eared foxes who called the Animal Encounters Village home. He was named after Bruce Wayne, get it? bat-eared fox, Batman, and was one of the animals with the most personality among the AEV animals, which is saying something. It's so sad to think that Bruce and Ivy are no longer there, being adorable and making so many people fall in love with their species, since, Ivy passed in March. But it's also somewhat poetic that they passed away just a few months apart after being an inseparable duo for their fans for just years on end. And then the last thing I want to talk about in this section is that the Dublin Zoo is currently in the midst of an EEHV crisis, and it is absolutely heartbreaking. On July 1st, the zoo announced the passing of Avani, an 8-year-old female Asian elephant. They followed this up by saying goodbye to Zinda, a 7-year-old female, on the 7th of July. And then, on the 10th of July, they announced that Asha, the 17-year-old mother of Zinda, has also been diagnosed with the disease. Now, as of the time of this recording, Zinda is still being treated for the disease, and there is hope that she will pull through. In fact, her slightly older age may actually be a benefit in the battle against EEHV, as her body has had more time to develop antibodies to fight the infection. And I have two things I want to say about this whole situation here. First of all, I cannot even imagine what the animal care and veterinary teams are going through at the Dublin Zoo at this time. They are having what I sincerely hope is the worst professional week any of them will ever experience, and I am sending all the love and hope I can across the pond to them. The second thing I want to point out here is that, as I've mentioned on here recently, there is currently a vaccine for this terrible disease that is being tested at the Houston Zoo. And I am just beyond impressed that this vaccine has been created and is being tested. But I'm also just so grateful for scientists who know they have to do things the right way and take the time to do so. I legitimately don't know if I could sit there and watch a story develop like this and not think, hey, let's rush this vaccine out and get it to Dublin and possibly save all the elephants there. Yay! But the truth is, it could do so much more damage or create a new strain of the disease that is vaccine resistant or cause so many other problems for elephants that the team is right to wait. I'm so glad that we have scientists who understand all of that and who take the process seriously, because I know that cannot be easy, especially in moments like this. But that's also when it's the most necessary. Sending all my love to everyone in Dublin going through what they're going through right now. And then that moves us to the rest of our Zoo News stories for the week. A big shout out to the Oakland Zoo, which continues to do incredible work rehabilitating local wildlife along with their actual, incredible zoo and conservation efforts. The latest local patients are 3 wild condors being treated for lead toxicity. One of the birds is actually from Southern California, but wasn't able to be treated by any zoos in the area because it potentially has highly pathogenic avian influenza, which could be devastating to the populations of condors held at those zoos. So the Oakland Zoo decided to take her in. The other 2 condors are also females, but they're from the Big Sur area, one of which is a mother to a young chick that is being cared for by its father as the mother finishes its treatment. The hope is that all 3 birds will be fully rehabilitated and returned to the wild, though obviously the potential avian influenza situation could mess with that hope and plan. The giant panda announcements keep coming as China prepares to send even more of these bears into zoos around the world. The latest announcement comes from the Hong Kong Zoo, which will be getting a pair of the bears later this year. Now, this may seem a little confusing to some of you, as you may be thinking that Hong Kong is a part of China, so this isn't so much an export of pandas as it is an internal transfer, so to speak. And you're both right and wrong on that count, as Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China with its own governing and economic systems that are distinct from those of mainland China. So while it's not quite as big of a diplomatic gesture as sending pandas to, say, the United States or Australia, it's still a pretty big deal. And it's definitely a big deal for Hong Kong. So congrats to the zoo there. The Reed Park Zoo did something really amazing and unique for Pride last month. They started a program in which they donate their excess first aid supplies to the Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation, which then redistributes the products to the community, helping to prevent the spread of HIV/AIDS and hepatitis. Now, I'm sure that you remember my friend Muffy, the white-cheeked gibbon who lives at the Nashville Zoo. Well, she recently celebrated her 55th birthday. Now, you may remember from that episode that she is the oldest white-cheeked gibbon in human care in the U.S., and she is just an absolute queen. As you would expect, this led to a huge celebration of her birthday with a fairy tale-themed party featuring some of her favorite treats. For an older gal who just loves attention, I'm sure this was an incredible time, and I darn well better get my invitation to her 56th birthday party, just saying. Maritime Aquarium has announced a new exhibit that I think is pretty cool, as it incorporates all kinds of different things that tie together nicely. The exhibit is called Travel Back in Maritime, and in it you will see current species native to Long Island Sound, along with fossils and representations of their family lines dating back to prehistoric times. Couple these items, and the animals of course, with a 4D film that looks at the sea monsters of prehistoric times, along with signage that really digs into the evolutionary history of the animals that you're seeing live in this exhibit, and you end up with a really comprehensive time travel experience at the aquarium. So make sure you go check it out. The Taipei Zoo has partnered with the Pingtung Rescue Center for Endangered Wild Animals and the Taiwan Biodiversity Research Institute to do a study analyzing the births of over 50 Chinese pangolins in the wild and in human care. The study focused on a few things, including what has been working in breeding in human care, as well as the differences between pangolin babies born in the wild as opposed to ones born in human care. Now, this study comes at a time when pangolins are starting to be born in human care with greater success, something that has not been the case for a long time, which is a big part of why you don't see many pangolins at zoos in the United States. There's actually a whole story about that, but it's too detailed and dramatic to get into right now. Interestingly, with successful pangolin births in human care, the babies tend to be born significantly longer and heavier than their wild counterparts, and they gain weight at nearly double the rate of pangolins born in the wild. Also, they are born year-round because mating happens year-round as opposed to seasonally in the wild. So all of that, on the surface, seems really promising to me. I mean, we always talk about how we want, animals in human care to still just be the animals, but those all sound like more positive developments, I think. So here's hoping we are able to continue to learn and then figure out ways to successfully breed pangolins, the world's most trafficked species in the United States. The AZA should absolutely be at the forefront of saving this species, and I believe a big part of that is raising awareness by having a successful zoo-based population, and also by working on creating a breeding population for release back into the wild should the need arise. As of right now, the only AZA facility in the United States that actively exhibits pangolins is Brookfield Zoo. There are a few others that house them, but yeah, Brookfield is it right now, and that's just not enough for me, so hopefully we learn from this. A quick congratulations to the Philadelphia Zoo, which turned 150 years old on July 1st, making it America's very first zoo. I mean, it was already America's very first zoo, but now it's 150. You know what I mean. Anyway, happy birthday to the Philadelphia Zoo. The Houston Zoo had to close for 5 days this week following Hurricane Beryl. All animals and team members were able to survive the hurricane with no issue, but cleanup and maintenance issues made it necessary to close for these multiple days. I actually really appreciate the fact that the zoo just announced right away that they would be closing for multiple days, because I'm guessing that made them feel not rushed and also didn't force them to have to decide, like, on a day-by-day basis with everything else going on, oh, geez, can we open tomorrow? It was a good way to just handle the situation. And then I'm going to end this section with a quick story from the Kansas City Zoo, which recently put up an incredible social media post showing a chimpanzee named Rue holding a frog. And I know what you're thinking. But no, the frog was not destroyed. In fact, Rue has had many recorded incidents over the last few years in which she interacts with local toads and frogs that she finds in her habitat, and every time she is gentle and curious, not only causing no harm to the little animal, but also ensuring that none of the other chimps in her troop get too close. Sometimes she will even place her amphibian friend on her back and take it on a ride through her forest habitat. The story is just so beautiful. What an amazing, amazing girl. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't think there is a zoo in the country I'm more eager to get to right now than the Kansas City Zoo. From stories like this, to Obi the tree kangaroo Joey, to featuring all 4 of my favorite animals, to Littlefoot the penguin who made it all the way to the finals in Penguins International's March of the Penguin Madness, to the incredible social media work the team there is doing daily, I just really need to get there. I am literally obsessed with a facility I haven't even been to yet. Absolutely incredible. And that brings us to
Conservation! Conservation! News time! Oh yeah!
All right, so we already mentioned Hurricane Beryl briefly, which, by the way, might be the worst name for a hurricane ever. But anyway, this is a hurricane that recently moved up the coast of Mexico before heading towards the United States. And the government of Mexico did everything it could to evacuate its citizens living on beachfront property. And I don't just mean the human citizens, but the sea turtle eggs that have been laid along the coast as well. The turtle eggs were kept in coolers and covered in sand once they were dug up and transported to safer spots in the areas that were expected to be hit the hardest, while areas that were safer but still at some risk of storming were given sandbags to protect the original nesting sites. Now, while government conservationists agree that removing the eggs isn't the best thing to do for them, there was a very real belief that all of the eggs that were removed would be lost if not for this effort. So even a low hatch rate at this point would be preferable. I am so grateful to the people who moved so quickly to try to save sea turtles. A new study in Frontiers in Science looks at the effect of unprotected lands on animal conservation and reaches a startling conclusion. If the governments of the world were willing to protect just 1.2% of the world's surface that is currently unprotected, which is an area just slightly smaller than Alaska, thousands of the world's most threatened animals could be saved. Now, the problem here is that this area of land isn't one continuous area. In fact, it's 16,825 different small unprotected sites located around the globe that the study dubs conservation imperatives. The authors of the study say if these areas are not granted protections within the next 5 years, there will be mass extinctions across the globe beyond what we are already seeing in this period of mass extinction. And I see this news as both a good thing and a bad thing, honestly. First of all, that's not a lot of land. We protect a lot more than that already. And secondly, since it's broken down into a huge number of conservation imperatives, it means the land is spread out. So it's not like saying we have to shut down everything going on in an area the size of Alaska. But it also means that every one of those conservation imperatives is going to have its own government and its own citizens and industries and all kinds of unique factors. A lot of stakeholders, y'all. So getting those lands protected isn't one battle, but is 16,825 different battles. And so that's like the tricky part, but also they're much smaller battles, which is good. So it's definitely an interesting discussion to have, and hopefully this study can help with land protection efforts around the globe for the next few years. And then last but not least in this section, here is, we'll call it a topic that's a little dicey, I'd say. You know, it's one of those things I think a lot of people are going to feel some kind of way about, myself included. There is a competition in New Zealand, okay? Now, it's a hunting competition, but it's hunting an invasive species. In fact, it's hunting several invasive species, but one in particular that is an invasive species that does a lot of damage to the animals and even some of the plants that live in this area that are native to this area. And actually, the main animal we're talking about here does that to a lot of animals and plants across the world in general. It's an invasive species we talk about on here a lot that is responsible for the deaths of countless native animals every single day. And if you haven't guessed it yet, yes, I'm talking about cats, specifically feral cats. And I feel like there are at least some of you who were listening just now going, oh, that's fine. Oh, invasive species are bad. Oh, hunting is used to get rid of invasive species sometimes, and that totally makes sense. And oh my God, did he just say they hunt cats? Like little kitty cats? Oh my God, no. As you then clutched Mrs. Bottomsworth too close and ended up with scratches for it. So yeah, okay, this event takes place in North Canterbury in New Zealand. And it's a competition that allows adults and children in the area to hunt feral cats along with deer, pigs, ducks, possums, and rabbits, all of which are also invasive species to the area. But nothing gets more attention than the feline category, which is prizes of $500 for the most cats killed, like in number, and $1,000 for the biggest cat killed. Now, this is a particularly sensitive subject in New Zealand, which, as an island nation with a lot of unique wildlife, is even more susceptible to the dangers of feral cats than other areas, but which also has one of the world's highest rates of cat ownership per capita, with close to half of all households owning a cat. So it's a super interesting and often frustrating discussion when it comes to the discussion of the hunt in general and the cat part of it specifically. Now, so-called animal rights activists are obviously up in arms about the event, while its defenders say it is important for native animal conservation. The activists, of course, claim there is no form of conservation that involves killing any animals at all, which is obviously not true. But they're cats. They're little kitty cats, y'all. I'm genuinely curious. Where do you fall on this idea of this hunt? So curious what you're thinking, y'all. Let me know.
It's time for other news. It's time for other news. Hey, now, right now, it's time. It's time for other news. Hey, it's a segue to the part called other news.
All right, so speaking of cats, Vermont State University's Castleton campus had a unique graduate this last semester, Max, a cat that has roamed the campus for the last 4 years. The cat is a bit of a legend on campus, where he will often catch rides on the top of students' backpacks, show up during campus tours, and even wander into packed lecture halls looking for attention. Over the last few years, as the legend of Max has grown, the university started listing him on their staff directory and even gave him his own email address. So this year, the university decided to bestow upon Max an honorary Doctor of Literature degree, officially making him part of the graduating class of 2024. Now, if you're like me, you may be thinking that while this is a very cute story, it's also surprising that a school has embraced a feral cat while allowing it to roam freely and remain astray. Well, that's where the story gets even weirder, as Max isn't a feral cat. He lives at a house down the street from the main entrance of the campus with the Dow family, but they let him be an outside cat, and he embraces this by visiting the school regularly. It's a cute story. It's a great pun name for the degree, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that allowing cats to be outdoor cats is a real problem for the cats and for the environment they wreak havoc in. And, honestly, this is why there's a cat hunt in New Zealand right now, y'all. It's a real problem. Look, in truth, most outdoor cats suffer and cause a lot of suffering, and a very, very small percentage of them ever even get bachelor's degrees, much less doctorates. So it's really not worth the risk, y'all. Keep your cats inside. On a funnier note, capybaras were recently filmed walking down the street in Brasilia, just walking, single file, like the world's most adorable rodent parade, and I want to go to there. That's the whole story, but frankly, it's a good one. And then last, but not least in this section, remember that whole Przewalski's horse thing? And there were 2 that were rescued recently, but one we weren't sure if it was a Przewalski's horse or not. They got the DNA back, and it is apparently a true 100% pure Przewalski's horse. I don't know how these 2 horses got into the pipeline. One of them, Fiona, the female, is apparently, the people who have it and now know that it is a Przewalski's horse, have said that they want to do the right thing and get it to a zoo or something. They'll figure it out. But those who own Shrek are still saying that they should get to keep Shrek and hold on to Shrek and just have a male Przewalski's horse because they saved it from being turned into Przewalski's glue. And I get it, but no, it's an endangered animal, and no. So we will continue to follow this story. But yeah, 2 Przewalski's horses just out there in the world, just like you would expect, just in the rescue pipeline. Craziness.
Animal, animal, animal holidays. Animal, animal, animal holidays.
All right, it is July, which is Plastic Free July, National Bison Month, Parks and Recreation Month, and Wild About Wildlife Month. Then for our individual days this week, we have absolutely nothing on the 12th or 13th, which makes it frustrating that on the 14th, we have World Orca Day, World Chimpanzee Day, and Shark Awareness Day. The 15th is Arctic Sea Ice Day and I Love Horses Day, and the 16th is Guinea Pig Appreciation Day, and those are your animal holidays for the week. All right, there you have it. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News is done. And I'd like to take a moment here to thank my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, and Jenny Owens, and remind you that you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. I'd also like to thank everyone who contributed stories this week, including Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Carrie Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Melissa Reed, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Elizabeth Charles, Matt Patford, Dr. Laura Schenk, Lizard Dunlevy, Ali Malensky, Kay Malensky, the Malenskys, and Yoshioka, Elizabeth Vickery Lewis, Ren Olson, Karen Musklow, Rebecca Surian, and Daniel Cohen. Thank you all so much for contributing to this week's episode. And last but not least, remember, friends, the words, newsy credits, backwards, are Steiderk, Yiswen. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo. In an incubator. Incubator. God.